All right. Hey, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Becoming a Management Scientist podcast. So I think I said in the last episode I was going to do a kind of a synopsis on Dopesick. And so that is what I'm going to do. It's actually going to be a three-parter. And I will go into all of that as I go through the episode. Again, if you guys enjoy this content, please let others know to give it a listen. You can listen to it on Apple, on Spotify, and there's several other podcast sites. If they don't have access to listen to anything for free on podcasting, you can also watch it on YouTube under the channel Management Scientist Pod, because I do put a visual recording up for that as well. But yeah, if you'll tell, it's kind of going through word of mouth. If you guys will tell others and tell them to give it a listen. I typically do, if this is your first time listening, I typically do things relating to like mental health, LGBTQ, also addiction recovery, and like religious trauma, which has been the last maybe one or two episodes. But now I will get on with this episode. So this is going to be chapter 9. Again, this is going to be a three-parter. Let me give a little warning. This episodes may not be too suitable for anybody under maybe under the age of 13. It is about a show that is available on Hulu, but it does talk about addiction and the opioid epidemic. So I do want to kind of put that warning out there. But again, this is going to be a three-parter. And today I'm going to go over the first kind of 3 episodes. I'm also going to talk a little bit about, I've done a previous episode on the opioid epidemic in specifically kind of in the southern part of the Appalachian region. This also was based kind of like a lot of the people were based kind of in the coal mining towns in a town not far from where I grew up in Southwest Virginia. But it does kind of encompass, it goes from Maine to Pennsylvania to Ohio, and Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, things like that. This isn't going to necessarily just be a synopsis of the show. Really what I'm titling this is, Dopesick, but it's what they got right and why people should be watching it. I am not the type to watch too much television. I don't really watch a lot of live TV. I usually only have Hulu and Netflix, and we'll watch something that's, been on previously. But I saw where Michael Keaton had won a SAG award for his part in Dopesick. He plays Dr. Finnick, or Phoenix. I think that might be how you say the name. And I read the title of it and I got interested. So I kind of read through the synopsis and started the first episode. And I was like, oh, this is something that I've done a lot of research on. So let me see how accurate they were. And right off the bat, I can tell you that this is, yes, they took some liberties into making it more suitable for drama. But in reality, like they did a very, very good job of keeping it true to what happened. With Perdue Pharma and the Sackler family and this rise of the opioid crisis and addiction and overdose, and kind of how big pharma had a hold over government and government agencies, even to the point of the FDA, and why people were afraid to go against them. So let me start off by giving a few facts about actual facts about where this started, kind of what started it. Again, I did do 2 previous episodes on this called The Plight of Appalachia, and it was about the opioid epidemic. But these are just some facts. In the mid 90s, you didn't see a lot of narcotic use as far as primary care physicians and in the hospital for patients that weren't terminal. Usually heavy narcotics, which at the time it was like Percocet and Vicodin, were used for terminally ill patients, those that had cancer or, even at the last stages of AIDS, anything to help kind of ease the pain in hospice before, they're passing, or if they, were having heavy doses, I guess, of radiation and it was causing pain, I guess they could be prescribed those things as well. But in the mid 90s, Perdue Pharma and the Sackler family came up with a time-released narcotic called Oxycontin. Oxycontin might have actually already been on the market as a heavier dose narcotic, but this was specifically released as time-released so that it could get through all these regulations and could be suitable for use in patients that weren't terminal. And this was around like 95, 96, 97. And one of the things, as I get into the first episode, and it's right off the bat, they show, obviously they start and they kind of introduce some of the characters, but right off the bat, they show the beginnings of the trial against the Sacklers and Perdue Pharma. And they show the attorneys asking, what did the pharmaceutical reps tell you was the percentage of people who would get addicted to Oxycontin? And every single doctor said that the pharmaceutical reps said less than 1% of their patients would get addicted because it was time released. Now, keep the number 1% in your mind because it's going to come into play later as well. But everyone said that. And then you get to Dr. Finnick, who gives the same answer. And then they ask him, Dr. Finnick, how many patients were there that got addicted? And what he says is so telling for the rest of the episodes. He says, so many are gone now. And what he's meaning is that so many have overdosed or they have died from some other complication from this. They have maybe gotten killed because they were selling, or killed because of someone else's missteps of being on this drug. And so it's really telling for the entire premise. And they kind of get right into it in the first episode. You meet, like I said, you meet everybody and you meet this small town. You also meet the attorneys that want to bring this. You're introduced to the attorneys that want to bring this to court. And you're also introduced to a DEA agent that had been wanting to bring a case against Perdue. But you kind of see her not really backing off, but not really saying anything when the attorneys come to talk to her. But what happens in this first episode is after the introductions of everyone, the only thing that I don't particularly like, but I guess they kind of had to do it, is throughout the entire series, they jump back and forth through time. So it goes to the present, it goes to the past, it goes to the present. It goes like to 2005, it goes to today, it goes to, not really today, but it goes a little further in the future. It goes back to 96. It goes, it jumps back and forth, but I guess they kind of had to get the story out there. So that's one of the things that they kind of did to make it a little more relatable for TV drama. But in this first episode, you see the Sackler family. They are like in a discussion. So half the family is not impressed with, it's Richard Sackler in the show. That could very well be his real name too. He is the one that has brought about this time-released Oxycontin. And he's brought about all the marketing, and he's apparently used way too much money. So part of the family is like not impressed. They're like, what's going to happen? You can't bankrupt us because of this. And he keeps telling them it's going to work out. It's going to work out. So they begin to make these, they start to sell it to different hospitals, small town doctors, and they especially do it in industrial towns. And by that, I mean like in Maine, this is where it started. It was in Maine, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia. And the reason because of that is because obviously in Maine, you have these very large lobster vessels that go out, and people can get injured in that. Complete like injury in all of these towns, in the industry in all these towns is injuries are very likely going to happen. Obviously it's coal mining, lumber, steel, and then your fishing vessels. So they send out these pharmaceutical reps. And the big thing is, and it happens with a lot of pharmaceutical reps still now, they go in, they give you, like it for Dr. Finnick, the guy brings in like a bucket of KFC, just like small town, brings in a bucket of KFC, and they start to talk about this drug, it being time released. And another number that you need to keep in your mind is when they initially set it out, it was 10 milligrams. And so they give them this spiel. They tell them because it's time released, it lasts 12 hours. They only have to take 10 milligrams. That 10 milligrams will last 12 hours. And there is less than 1% chance that your patient is going to become addicted to this, narcotic. Because that is the question on every doctor's, mind is, well, it's a narcotic. How addictive is it? How habit forming is it? But so they go to these small towns, all these pharmaceutical reps. And yes, there are a few of them that are like, is this, what, because they don't know what testing has actually been done. And so they don't know that it's not completely truthful what they're selling. They are just, this is what they have learned. This is what they have heard. This is what they're going to push out. And so they start pushing it out to these doctors. It jumps back and forth to the attorneys. Two of them, I think they're both in close to like Abingdon, Virginia. It jumps to them, and one of them is downstairs in his house, and he's watching these ads. And we've all seen them. They used to be more prevalent, and they're still prevalent for like different kinds of drugs. But they are watching these pain medication ads and these people talking about, oh, I can now go to work. I haven't missed a day of work. I can function. I can do this. I don't have pain. I can sleep, whatever. Well, the one thing that he mentions about these ads is that they never use the name Oxycontin. It is never mentioned. There is the long pharmaceutical name for it, I guess kind of written across the screen. And it says, like it shows that it's time released. But what he says is like, they never mention the name. Then it gets to one of the other attorneys who is reffing, I guess, a football game. And he goes over and he sees one of the girls from the town, and her name is Betsy. She did work in the coal mines. He sees her in the car, and she looks like she was sleeping, but you can kind of tell that she's on something. And he asks her if she's okay. And she offers him a sexual favor for money, I guess, to go buy more drugs. And he's like, we need to get you to a hospital. And then she just kind of speeds off. Betsy also comes into play just a little bit later because she is one of the families in Dr. Finnick's town that works in the mines that will later get put on Oxycontin as he starts to prescribe it for more and more of his patients. So during this whole first episode is them trying, the DA is trying to bring a case against Perdue, trying to build this case. And they go and they speak to the DEA agent who wasn't she wasn't going to give them a lot of answers. She kind of just stayed quiet. And they basically, like, as they were walking out, told her, regardless of you not telling us anything, we're still going to bring something against them. And as we get later into the episode, we see the previous investigation. I think it's the previous. I couldn't exactly tell when the timeline went. But of this same DEA investigator, they had done a bust at a local drug den. It was supposed to be a cocaine bust, and they ended up grabbing a sack of pills, and it was Oxycontin. And that is when the DEA, her specifically, she was trying to find out more information on this, and she started to call around to different, I guess, different police departments, different agencies in different states where Oxycontin was prevalent. And she starts asking them questions about it, and they have said that there has been an uptick in not only crime, the jails are overcrowded now because of users and sellers. There's been an uptick in child abandonment. There's been an uptick in kids going into foster care. And there's also been a large uptick in not only prostitution, but in prostitution of minors. And it all revolves around this narcotic. And so she begins her investigation, and it goes into, she's talking to other DEA like agents about bringing this, and talking about how they need to get a restrictive label, or go against the label that was put on the bottle. And one of the agents says the FDA approved this label, so they're not going to go against Perdue Pharma or the Sacklers. It also starts to show how government agencies, you start to see the beginning of government agencies kind of getting in the pocket of big pharma, and why they don't want to go against them. And so they actually go in to the FDA office, and they are speaking to someone there, and they're talking about the label that the FDA approved. And this comes back in another episode, in like, I think the third episode, which I'll also go over. And the FDA approved a label that said it was less addictive. And that usually takes a lot of trial and error for the FDA to approve something. But it was word of mouth from the Sacklers saying that this is not addictive, or it's less addictive, was the term that they used. They never said it wasn't addictive. They just said it was less addictive. So they put this special label on it, making it less of a class of narcotics. Literally, it revolved around this whole theory of it being time released. Well, then, as she does more investigations, and she's talking about, even though the FDA put this label on it, she's done her research, and she says that in less than 3 years, it took 3 years from the introduction of Oxycontin into these areas, into the hospitals and the doctor's offices in this area. It took 3 years, just a little less than 3 years, for the amount of addiction and overdose to basically double. And it was all surrounding Oxycontin. And so that's pretty much the whole of the first episode. Although in this episode, there's Betsy, the girl I was talking about. She was working in the mine, and she got injured. But in the first episode, you kind of see her talk to the doctor, but she doesn't. She doesn't really. I don't think it's the first episode. I think it's the second episode that Dr. Finnick actually gives her the Oxycontin. You kind of see her fighting the pain on her own. Which before these narcotics, even in the show, it showed doctors prescribing Tylenol, or Motrin to these patients because that was all they could give. And, some of the patients were still miserable, but they weren't, suffering through what was going to happen when, Oxycontin got introduced. So that's episode 1. Episode 2 basically starts out showing how the time-released Oxycontin is on the market. And it also shows how the DEA actually starts. Sorry, my nose is dripping. The DEA starts their reluctant investigation into Perdue Pharma and the Sackler family. And the reason I say reluctant is because, again, large pharma and the 1%, not the 1% of those that get addicted, but the 1% of wealth in this country have a very large hold on not only senators, state representatives. They not only have a hold on that, but they do on government agencies and, some in the judicial system because of the amount of wealth, the amount of power that they hold. And this is the reason, and the kickbacks that they give to government agencies are the reason why no one wants to go after them, and is the reason why this was allowed to happen. And so, as this episode starts, after the investigation starts, we see Dr. Finnick give Betsy, he gives her 3 days worth. And I don't know if she just gets another prescription from him or if she goes somewhere else, because you see her with more pills later, but he gives her a prescription of 10 milligrams. And this plays a very big part in what comes a little bit later, which is also really scary. He gives her 3 days worth of pills. And he tells her to only take 1 pill in the morning and 1 pill at night. And that's what she starts out with. Well, you see her through the next 20, 30 minutes of the episode. She's with her girlfriend, which was another factor that they kind of wanted to play into it. But they show her with her girlfriend, and they are in her girlfriend's RV trailer. And she starts to have obvious, if you know anything about detoxing, she starts to have obvious withdrawals. And a lot of it's psychosomatic because of the addiction. It's not necessarily that she was in a lot of pain. It's this psychosomatic reaction to it and the withdrawal. And so she goes into her truck, into the glove compartment, and gets out 2 pills and takes it. And after she takes it, you see this euphoric look on her face. It's time lapsed. So, it's been a little, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, but you see this euphoric look over her face. And that's when the show cuts to a pharmaceutical rep conference, and they're talking about the pills. And then it cuts to Sackler talking about how some, his people that he works with, they're talking about how some people, that it wasn't lasting 12 hours because let me cut back for just a second before I do that. So I guess in a meeting that the DAs were in, there was a meeting about, or it was during the trial, something like that. Something came up that the time release didn't last 12 hours. That was brought up. So then it cuts to the pharmaceutical reps inside, because every pharmaceutical rep, when they're learning about a new drug, they'll go through these conferences. And the person was bringing about, here's, the question we've been getting about it lasting 12 hours. Well, then it cuts to Sackler talking to some of the people that work for his family. And he's talking about, they're talking about it not working. And he says, my Uncle Arthur who came up with, I think they came up with Vicodin. He said, my uncle Arthur made this drug to take for anxiety. He was like, but then to get a higher dose, he had to come up with basically not really, but an imaginary, they created a condition that was called like a psychic, I can't remember what the name was for it, but psychic something. And basically they came up with this so they could come out with a new drug that was stronger, which was Vicodin. And they take that for, these really strong cases. Well, because of that, this is when they decide to come up with this condition called breakthrough pain. And basically what they're saying is if your patient experiences breakthrough pain, then you need to double the dose. So if your patient was originally taking 10 milligrams, they experience breakthrough pain, they need to double the dose. So they need to take 20 milligrams. If your patient was taking 20 milligrams already, you need to up it to 40 milligrams. Well, then, you start to see people like doubling these doses, and you see people like Betsy, like where she doubled the dose, you see what it does to her. You see, again, this uptick. And then it goes into the DEA really questioning why this label was created and was there any pushback. They keep asking, was there any pushback? And one of the ladies says, well, I told the guy that approved the label, I told him it looked like a load of shit, that it was less addicting. She was like, it looked like a load of shit. Well, the guy who approved it said, I agree, it is a load of shit. And he approved it anyway. It turns out that the man that approved it also worked for Perdue. And rather than his employees see this as a conflict of interest, they are like, no, it's nothing like that. He would have, if he knew that it wasn't good, he wouldn't have put this label on it. Again, which is where you see, the in the pocket of these, big pharma, all these people are in their pocket because they're paying them. So at the very end of the episode, when you see all these upticks in addiction and like you see overdoses on the rise, because they've doubled it, they come out with their highest dosage yet. And if you know anything about Oxycontin or hydrocodone or any kind of pain medicine narcotics, usually 20 milligrams is a lot. They came out with an 80 milligram pill. That is 8 times the original dosage, an 80 milligram pill. This is 80 milligrams that's designated to be sought out of 12 hours. It's supposed to last 12 hours. They take 2 of these a day. If they were to take 2 of these a day, 2 12-hour periods, that is 160 milligrams of Oxycontin going through their system a day that they still claim less than 1% will get addicted to. And as this episode starts to come to a close, but the next episode comes in to the beginning, you see one of the district attorneys has actually had surgery. And at the doctor's office, he refuses Oxycontin. And it's the very last thing of the episode, I believe. He refuses Oxycontin, and his surgeon is like, they ask him, he's like, I'll just take Tylenol. And the surgeon's like, no, we're all about pain management here. And the wife says, well, is there anything else he can take? And the guy says, well, I can give him like a 1,200 milligram doses of Motrin, which is ibuprofen. And he was like, but it's not going to last. And the guy looks at the camera, the man that's just had surgery, the DA, And he says, Oxycontin doesn't either. And then it ends the episode. So then episode 3 gets into basically the DAs, even Dr. Finnick, are really seeing what this drug has done, what it's done to ravage an entire area, several areas, ranging from Maine down. Again, that's mainly because it's not saying that it didn't go anywhere else in the US. It's mainly because those were the areas that it was introduced in first, because they were, these blue collar industrial, like coal mines, all that kind of stuff, somewhere where injuries were very prevalent. And you see Dr. Finnick with one of his patients who had shoulder problems, who was on Oxycontin, begin to have like range of motion in his shoulder. And he's like, yeah, I felt great. And you see Betsy in the mine, she is in full withdrawal. And in the mines, they have methane readers, because if there's methane gas, which is, I guess they used to have canaries that they used to have down in the mines that would let them know if there was methane gas. Because if you have methane gas and you run these machines and you hit your pickaxe or whatever, back in the day, against coal, and a spark strikes, it'll blow up because of the gas. Well, she was in full withdrawal and couldn't read the number on the meter. And the guy running the machine asked her, he was like, are we at good levels? And she just says yes, because she doesn't know what's going on. And he hits that spark and it blows up. And they're in the hospital and you see her crying, and they're asking her all these questions, and they're telling her this mine can shut down. Somebody could have died. Do you realize how much trouble you're in? And she's like, fully crying. And she's like, I don't know what's going on with me. Because she doesn't know that she's in withdrawal. She doesn't understand what it is. She doesn't realize that she's in withdrawal. And throughout the episode, you have seen Dr. Finnick trying to wean her off of this. Like, he doesn't want to give her anymore. And that's basically where her withdrawal symptoms start, because it cuts back from that to him telling her he's not going to write her another prescription, because he's kind of seeing what it's doing. And that's like, if you've never seen withdrawal symptoms, it's, you've got the shakes, you've got the sweats, you're going to throw up. It's like you have a fever, because your body's detoxing from these chemicals that you've put in it. And to cut someone off from something cold turkey, but also not knowing that they're addicted and they're withdrawing, is incredibly dangerous, not only for that person, but obviously for other people, around them. And so, it kind of goes in and out of like showing the trial that's going on, and then going back to investigations about, investigating like the Perdue. And at one point in time, you see one of the district attorneys in a meeting for the Appalachian Pain Foundation. Now, this is, a foundation that is supposed to help like negate like addiction. And they're having a discussion about Oxycontin versus, other narcotics. And they're trying to say that Oxycontin is fine, even though they've seen this uptick in like addiction. They're saying Oxycontin is fine, Vicodin's worse. Well, Vicodin isn't usually prescribed at such a rate that Oxycontin was. And it comes to find out that that foundation was paid $20,000 by Perdue. So that is a large part of the reason why they were saying Oxycontin is fine. So then it goes into, like it shows Dr. Finnick leaving. He was leaving somewhere, and he got a call that he had been to, I guess, a conference and about Oxycontin, and was told all of this, that Oxycontin was fine. Oxycontin was fine. You know, again, less than 1%. He had met someone there. And he was on his way. He was talking to her on the phone, and he got another call. He said, "I've got to call you back." And the call was that there had been an accident at the mine where it had exploded, or had an explosion. So he starts to drive towards the mine, and he gets into a car accident. Well, after this car accident scene, it shows the DEA and the DAs have started this, process of, wanting to take, and this is the criminal court case. This isn't even the civil court case that was brought against the Perdue Pharma. This is the criminal court case that they start, with the help kind of the DEA. Obviously, Washington is not for this, but they're allowing it. And so they are basically saying, we want to see the papers. We want to see the papers. And it cuts to this truck coming up, and it's a moving size truck. And they're thinking, oh, there can't be that many papers on the, like what's happened with Oxycontin or whatever. Well, they open the truck up and it's completely full. Then it cuts to like a scene in a courtroom, and it's where they are telling them they want to see, like, I guess the research into Oxycontin and how they came up with it. It wasn't addictive. And something that the attorney says is something that a lot of people say to addicts. They say it's not the fault of the pharma. It's not a fault of Perdue or their product that they made. It's the fault of the person that's taking it. It's their fault that they got addicted. It's not the product's fault. And that is something that a lot of people will say to addicts. They're like, it's not, it's not their fault. It's you chose to take it. You chose to do this. When in reality, no, it's bad labeling on a product that was told that less than 1% would become addicted. And in reality, it ravaged an entire area. And, thousands have died of overdoses because of this. And it cuts, he says that, and all this information is like, you can't see it. It's private, whatever. Well, then they cut to them getting this truck, and they're like, this is going to take us forever. Well, they don't realize that there are like 4 more trucks coming. And what it's done is that Perdue has given them all of this information, to all this backlogged information, basically so that they can continue to put it on the market and they continue to sell it and continue to make money before the DA can ever, before these DAs can ever bring a case. Well, then this episode ends on something that is very important and very prolific, and needs to be why people understand how dangerous. Yes, there are some pharmaceuticals that it's a necessity. We need to have them. But it shows how dangerous big pharma can be and the people who come up with this can be. Richard Sackler, at the end of this episode, they are having a discussion about they need to get it into Germany. They need to get it into Germany. And one of his people asks, well, why do you want to get it into the strictest country? And Richard Sackler says, because they have the strictest, they're so strict in what they allow that if they were able to get into Germany, it would open up a gateway to the rest of Europe, meaning they could put Oxycontin on a global market. And his line is, they're going to cure the world of pain. That's basically making it into a worldwide epidemic with opioids. So that's the first 3 episodes. And I'm going to give my thoughts on kind of basically, yes, apart from some of the dramatics, they got a lot of things right. And there was actually a lot of things in this that I even through my research, I didn't know about. I didn't actually know, not getting so in depth because most of my research has been basically in the area that I was from. I didn't know that they had tried to go through Germany. I didn't realize that that's what they were doing. I also didn't realize that the number that they had given for, how many people would become addicted, or how many, patients could become addicted, was less than 1%. And, this is why there's been, a lot of the families have gone against, Perdue Pharma, was because there was all of this positive, which of course there is if they're trying to sell a product. There was all this positive, and this reassurance, even through hospitals and doctors, this reassurance that, oh, no, it's fine. You're not, less than 1% become addicted, less than 1% become addicted. It's time released. If you use it how we prescribe it, you're not going to get, you're not going to get addicted to it. It's not going to be habit forming. And one thing I failed to mention before was, yes, that I had said that Dr. Finnick, towards the end of the episode, it was before what Sackler had said about taking it into Germany. Dr. Finnick went to the hospital. He had broken ribs, and the doctor there wanted to prescribe him Oxycontin. And he gave him 2 20-milligram pills. And Dr. Finnick says to him, oh, I usually start my patients out at 10 milligrams. And he was like, we like to base this on a case by case. And so that's something that's kind of sank into his mind, and probably something that's getting, like, well, is this safe? And there are even some of the pharmaceutical reps that are thinking the same thing, like, is this really safe? And so this is where this episode is where we actually start to see Dr. Finnick taking the drug. But yeah, it's a lot of the things in here, like, were pretty true to form, and it wasn't, there wasn't so much of the like dramatics just to make it a good series. It really was, and they really did it justice for somebody going through withdrawals and somebody, in that super throw of addiction. They really did it justice by showing, Betsy, like, how she was, and, what it was like, and the mistakes that were made, and her being scared, her family being scared. And that's what happens is, it's a very scary thing when you're taking off something that's been in your system for so long. And it's the same with, any kind of drug. It's the same with, heroin. It's the same with, meth. It's the same with any of it. Granted, they're different drugs, but it's the same thing. Like, once it gets into your system, if you withdraw off of it, you're going to have all of these horrible sickness symptoms, and, it's your body releasing all of that. But if you've never been addicted to something before, or you've never seen it, because this is a small town, if you've never seen something like this, and you don't have like a high rate of, drug abuse in your area, you're not going to know what withdrawal is. You're not going to know what's going on. And that's exactly what happened to her. And, we see how, imperative that was to the safety of others. And so, it just, it was really, really good. And I, like I said, I'm going to go through the next episode that I do. I'm going to go through episodes 4 through 6. And then the very last episode that I do of this, I'll do the last 2 episodes, and then I will read off, like, parts from the actual court case. I'll share some of that, anything that's public knowledge, obviously. I'll share some of that, but this is something that I very much go watch, because it's very eye-opening into what actually happened, what actually started it, how awful this epidemic is, how it ravages not only people, but families, towns, and how hard it was. It actually shows you how hard it was. You would think it would be easier to bring about a case with all of this happening, but it shows you how hard it was to actually bring a case against Perdue Pharma and the Sackler family. But again, even this first 3 episodes, they were, great. And they really showed, like, it's really a visual representation of what was going on in the area and what's still going on in the area. In all these areas and all these, kind of blue collar industrial towns, it really shows what's happening. And, it happens to small families. It happens, it's not just super poverty stricken where there's already drugs. It's not that. This is something completely different. And this was something that was man-made, that was marketed and was prescribed. And basically, these people, their doctors, all of it were lied to. And, that's kind of what the court case starts out at, is like this, how can we prove that they were untruthful in their marketing? And how can we prove that should be on them, all of these overdose deaths and, the bulk of this crime, which, again, it'll come in the later episodes. But so hopefully you guys will enjoy this 3-part series, or, at least get something out of it. And hopefully you'll continue to listen. And we will see you next week. Again, please, if this, is something you really like to listen to, tell your friends, share it on social media pages. Again, this is on YouTube, and I usually list everything, including my email and other socials, on in the description box. So if you want to give it a listen there or give it a watch there, but we will see you guys next week for the rest of the synopsis for the next 3 episodes.